fired her ex-husband. She made him the bad guy.
The divorce would have never even been out if he didn't file the motion to use our full and legal names.
Then she had to go and she had to get new energy. What was she calling him? Her apple pies? Have you seen my apple pies?
Did you see my apple pie?
Oh my God, you did a love scene with Leonardo DiCaprio.
How was it shooting those scenes with Leo?
It was just work.
Hold up. Because what Jaguar Wright just threw into the spotlight is making people question everything they ever thought they knew about Hollywood romances. What once seemed like a flawless, soft-launch love story is now being cast in shadows, colder, darker, and allegedly far more calculated than anyone could have imagined. And if even a fraction of this holds true, this isn't just a breakup tale. This is a carefully constructed illusion, crumbling before our eyes. According to Jaguar Wright, the so-called perfect connection between Tayana Taylor and Pierre wasn't born from sparks or fate, it was manufactured. Allegedly engineered, meticulously planned, packaged, and sold. Jaguar didn't whisper it. She declared it boldly, unapologetically. In Hollywood, love only trends when it profits. And she claims this relationship ticked every single PR box imaginable. And then, just like that, the room goes silent. Jaguar alleges that Pierre's rise leaned heavily on the loyalty of black women, but his private dating history tells a very different story. Names start surfacing, receipts hinted at, and suddenly, old photos, appearances, and moments are being revisited under an uncomfortable new light. A wedding appearance that felt too intimate. A forehead kiss that was anything but casual. A caption that didn't whisper, but screamed connection, not coincidence, allegedly. And then Jaguar slices deeper. She questions whether Tayana, fresh from a messy, public divorce, needed a complete narrative reset, a clean slate, a distraction, something strong enough to drown out the endless rumors, whispers, and speculation that followed her relentlessly. And according to Jaguar, Aaron wasn't merely a boyfriend, he was a shield. What hits even harder is the implication that everyone was performing a role, smiling for cameras, feeding the fantasy, letting fans fall in love with a story that may never have been real. And if it was all orchestrated, then the tragedy isn't just the breakup, it's the betrayal of belief itself. So now the question isn't whether they are still together. The real question is, were they ever real at all?
Shout out to Tayana Taylor! Her contract is up! Her and Aaron, I almost called him Hernandez. That's Stefan Diggs, my bad. That's not, Stefan Diggs is Aaron Hernandez, okay? Aaron Pierre, okay? What's that song? Mufasa? What's that song, Mufasa?
Yeah, that's Mufasa.
Buckle up, because what's unfolding right now is far from a love story. This is a slow-motion collision of image, ambition, and a truth that refuses to stay buried. This is the kind of scenario where smiles start to feel scripted, timelines refuse to align, and the silence from those involved speaks louder than any official statement ever could. At the center of it all, Jaguar Wright, not whispering cautiously, not tiptoeing, but speaking like someone who knows the curtain has already been ripped wide open. Allegedly, Jaguar didn't come online to gossip. She came to disrupt, to shatter a narrative that had been meticulously curated and sold to the public as something organic, romantic, and aspirational. According to her, the connection between Tayana Taylor and Pierre wasn't born from a spontaneous spark. It was a carefully calculated alignment. The kind that Hollywood has mastered over decades. The kind that looks real enough to trend, yet controlled enough to quietly expire when the agenda is complete. From the outside, it seemed flawless. Two accomplished creatives. Two captivating public figures. Two careers peaking in tandem. The photos were tasteful, the appearances strategically timed, the energy deliberate. And that's exactly where Jaguar says the warning signs begin. In this industry, timing is never accidental, it's always strategic. When everything lines up with surgical precision, questions start to surface. What's being orchestrated behind the scenes? Jaguar Wright alleges that Pierre's rise placed him directly in the gaze of a very specific audience, one known for unflinching loyalty and deep cultural investment. Support that doesn't just inflate numbers, but builds legacies. And according to Jaguar, that support carried immense weight. That's where the narrative starts to feel uncomfortable, because she claims the public image often didn't match the private reality. Patterns, when repeated enough times, stopped being coincidence. Names began to circulate, old associations resurfaced, and what once seemed innocent now demanded scrutiny. Moments that once slipped by unnoticed were suddenly dissected under a harsher, unforgiving light. Jaguar Wright didn't make outright accusations, she hinted. She didn't shout conclusions, she connected the dots. And when those dots were drawn together, the image that emerged wasn't romantic. It was transactional, allegedly. Then came the wedding appearance, not a rumor, not speculation, but a real moment frozen in time, broadcast across platforms. Jaguar highlighted what so many had overlooked, or perhaps willfully ignored. You don't bring just anyone to a wedding. You don't share that kind of space casually. And you certainly don't display that level of comfort, unless there's history. The body language, the closeness, the effortless ease, all of it raised questions that remained unanswered. And when the image of a forehead kiss resurfaced, the narrative shifted again. That wasn't staged for cameras. It wasn't flashy. It was quiet, intimate, deliberate. Jaguar argued that gestures like this don't belong in PR playbooks, they belong to real connections. Once that image circulated, the carefully timed romance started to feel less convincing, more performative. Then the lens turned to Tayana Taylor. And here, the weight of the story landed heaviest. Allegedly, she was emerging from a chapter dissected, judged, and debated endlessly in public view. A divorce that wasn't just personal, it was painfully public. A narrative that refused to let her simply move on. Jaguar suggested that in moments like these, reinvention isn't vanity, it's survival. Image becomes armor. According to her, Tayana needed distance from the noise, the whispers, the constant speculation that haunted her every move. And in Hollywood, the fastest way to redirect the story? Present a new narrative, a clean, polished, romantic one that photographs perfectly and distracts effectively. Allegedly, Pierre fit that role flawlessly. But what made Jaguar Wright's commentary land so heavily was her insistence that this wasn't rooted in malice. This was about systems, about how women, especially those with strong, unmistakable identities, are often boxed into narratives they never wrote themselves. About how control gets mistaken for confidence, and how honesty or openness can quickly be weaponized. Later, Jaguar brought up Tayana Taylor's own words from past interviews, not to shame her, but to show how differently those words were received over time. Once upon a time, transparency was celebrated. Then it was twisted, spun into proof of instability, used as justification for judgment. Jaguar argued that when the very same industry that praises honesty turns around to punish it, the safest path becomes silence, or strategy. Allegedly, this relationship itself was strategy. And what makes this story so unnerving isn't any single claim, it's how perfectly everything aligns when viewed together. The timing, the optics, the sudden elevation of a romance that seemed to appear fully formed. No build-up, no backstory, just instant credibility. And when fans dared to question it, they were dismissed as cynical, told to let people be happy, told not to overthink it. But Jaguar insists overthinking is exactly what the public should be doing. Because according to her, Hollywood has a long history of selling dreams that expire on schedule, of pairing people not for chemistry or compatibility, but for convenience. And when that unspoken contract reaches its end, the fallout is always framed the same way, growing apart. As Jaguar Wright's commentary spread, reactions fractured instantly. Some labeled her bitter. Others called her fearless. But no one could dismiss her entirely, because even her loudest critics struggled to explain away the inconsistencies she exposed. And in the absence of clear answers, speculation rushed in to fill the silence. The real tragedy, if Jaguar's claims hold even partial truth, isn't that a relationship may have been fake. It's that millions of people emotionally invested in something that may have been designed to be temporary. Belief was leveraged. Trust was monetized. And authenticity became collateral damage. And this, allegedly, was only the beginning. Jaguar Wright hinted that what the public saw was merely the surface layer. That behind every carefully selected photo and every perfectly timed appearance, there were conversations never meant for public ears, agreements never disclosed, timelines quietly understood, endings already mapped out. When the clip ended, the silence that followed felt heavy. Not because clarity had arrived, but because questions multiplied. And once the idea of illusion takes root, it becomes impossible to unsee. This wasn't closure. It was an opening statement. The quiet after her words didn't feel accidental. It felt deliberate, like a pause in a courtroom, when everyone knows the next statement will land harder than the last. Because once orchestration entered the conversation, every past moment began to look different. Smiles felt timed. Appearances felt scheduled. Even the silence from those involved started to feel less like privacy and more like strategy. Allegedly, Jaguar Wright didn't stop at questioning motives. She pushed further, suggesting that unseen hands behind the scenes were far more involved than fans ever imagined. According to her, relationships like this don't exist in a vacuum. They pass through publicists, advisors, brand consultants, and quiet conversations that never make it to the timeline. Conversations that never reach the public eye. Jaguar Wright implied that when two public figures align at precisely the moment their images require protection, it's rarely coincidence. It's coordination. What made her claims so unnerving was the way she framed intention, not as romance, but as risk management. Allegedly, this was about stabilizing narratives, redirecting headlines, and ensuring that when one story started to spiral, another appeared to soften the blow. And if that's true, then the romance itself wasn't the story, it was the cover. As Jaguar's commentary circulated, online timelines did what they always do. They dug. Old interviews resurfaced. Past quotes were pulled from context and reassembled into something far more ominous. Fans who had once defended the relationship began questioning what they had missed. Others doubled down, insisting not everything had to be cynical. But the damage was already done. Doubt had entered the conversation, and doubt is notoriously difficult to remove. Allegedly, the discomfort grew when people noticed how meticulously controlled the exposure had been. No messy candid moments. No unscripted tension. No visible friction. Everything appeared polished, curated, safe. And while that might seem ideal, Jaguar Wright suggested it was also deeply unnatural. Real relationships leak. They stumble. They reveal cracks. This one, she implied, did none of that. Then came the comparison that shifted the entire mood. Jaguar referenced previous high-profile pairings that followed the exact same arc. Sudden introduction, heavy media presence, mutual benefit, quiet disappearance, careers intact, narratives reset. The implication was clear. According to her, this wasn't a new playbook. It was recycled. And once you recognize the pattern, it becomes impossible to ignore. The tragedy in this scenario isn't the scandal, it's disposability. Allegedly, people become roles, emotions become instruments, and once the purpose has been served, everyone is expected to move on without asking questions. Jaguar Wright suggested this is precisely why breakups in situations like these rarely come with explanations. The ending is as meticulously controlled as the beginning. As the discussion deepened, sympathy began shifting in unexpected directions. Because if this was orchestrated, then everyone involved was under immense pressure. Pressure to perform happiness, pressure to protect brands, pressure to stay silent even as speculation swelled. And in that silence, the public rushed in to fill the gaps with their own conclusions. Allegedly, Jaguar hinted that the toll of maintaining such an illusion is heavy. Living inside a narrative scripted by others can slowly erode authenticity. And when the audience senses that erosion, they react. Sometimes with disappointment, sometimes with anger, sometimes with a sense of betrayal. Fans don't merely support careers, they invest emotionally. What made this moment feel even heavier was the unsettling suggestion that the truth might never fully surface. Jaguar Wright didn't promise receipts. She didn't claim definitive proof. She framed everything as awareness, as a warning, as a reminder that not everything presented as intimacy is grounded in genuine feeling. Some of it is carefully crafted optics. And as reactions poured in, the story took on a life of its own, independent, sprawling, and impossible to ignore. Comment sections erupted into debates. Clips were dissected frame by frame. Body language was analyzed, timelines meticulously mapped, and through it all, the absence of any clarification only fed the wildfire of speculation. Silence became proof for some, restraint for others. Allegedly, Jaguar Wright closed her remarks by asking why honesty in this industry is so often punished while performance is endlessly rewarded. Why does authenticity become dangerous the moment it stops being profitable? And why is the audience expected to accept endings without ever understanding the beginnings? Her tone wasn't triumphant. It was weary, like someone who has watched this cycle repeat too many times. The emotional weight settled slowly, not as shock, but as a deep, lingering disappointment. Because if even part of her claims are true, what was marketed as connection was, in reality, convenience. And that realization cuts far deeper than any typical breakup announcement ever could. By the time the conversation reached its peak, the narrative had completely shifted. This was no longer about who dated whom. It became a story about how easily perception can be shaped, how narratives are constructed, and how truth can become collateral damage when image takes precedence. And somewhere amid all that noise, one uncomfortable question hung in the air, not whether the relationship could survive, but whether it had ever truly existed outside the framework it was built in. Whether there was ever a moment untouched by cameras or agendas, a moment belonging only to the people involved. That question remains unanswered. And perhaps that's the point. Because in an industry fueled by illusion, certainty is rare. What's left is interpretation, suspicion, and the lingering unease that what the public was shown may have never been the full picture. This wasn't closure, it was escalation. And with that creeping uncertainty, the atmosphere around the story shifted from mere speculation to something far heavier, almost suffocating. Once doubt embeds itself into a narrative this polished, it does not fade quietly. It festers. Allegedly, that's when the pressure behind the scenes began to surface. Not in statements, not in interviews, but in what went unsaid. Observers started noticing subtle shifts. The energy changed, appearances slowed, interactions grew scarce. What once radiated confidence now seemed meticulously managed. According to the whispers Jaguar Wright alluded to, this is the stage where carefully constructed images start to crack, not outwardly, but internally. When the performance no longer feels sustainable, when the cost of maintaining the illusion outweighs the benefit. Allegedly, Jaguar suggested that this is the moment public figures dread the most. Not exposure, not scrutiny, but exhaustion, the kind that comes from holding a narrative together while the audience senses that something is off. Because once the crowd begins questioning authenticity, reassurance fails. Smiles stop convincing. Silence becomes suspicious. What made this phase especially tragic was the emotional investment already poured in. Fans didn't just admire from afar, they projected hope onto the pairing. They celebrated it as representation, as growth, as proof that reinvention was possible even after public pain. And if that belief was even partially engineered, the fallout wasn't just scandal, it was disillusionment. Allegedly, Jaguar Wright framed this not as a personal attack, but as an indictment of a system that rewards appearances over truth. She implied that individuals become trapped inside roles they never fully consented to play. Once a narrative becomes profitable, it is protected at all costs. And when it ceases to be useful, it is quietly dismantled, leaving those inside to absorb the backlash. As online discourse intensified, the story took on a courtroom-like rhythm. Evidence wasn't physical, it was in behavioral timing, in patterns, in absence. Every move became testimony, every pause interpreted as hesitation. And with each observation, the cracks widened, revealing a performance struggling to hold together. The lack of direct response from those involved only amplified the sense that something was being carefully weighed. Allegedly, Jaguar Wright hinted that endings in situations like this rarely explode in public. They are slow, calculated, framed as mutual understanding or natural distance. The goal isn't clarity, it's containment. To let the story fade without ever confirming what it truly was, and in doing so, protect what matters most, image. The emotional impact of that realization hit viewers hard because it suggested closure would never come. There would be no confession, no reveal, no moment of honesty to tie the story together. Just a gradual fade, a silent understanding to move on. And yet, the sadness lingered, because even if the relationship was strategic, the people involved were still human. Still navigating scrutiny. Still absorbing judgment. Allegedly, Jaguar acknowledged that duality, the coexistence of agency and pressure, of choice and constraint, of benefiting from a system while being consumed by it. As the narrative reached its most intense point, the conversation expanded beyond individuals. It became about trust. About how often audiences are asked to suspend disbelief. about how effortlessly narratives are sold when they align with what people want to see, and about the painful realization that hope, too, can be curated. The tragedy here isn't that love might have been staged. It's that authenticity has become so rare that people cling to the idea of it wherever they think they see it. And when that illusion collapses, it leaves behind more than disappointment. It leaves fatigue, cynicism, emotional withdrawal. Allegedly, Jaguar Wright's final implication was the most unsettling. This cycle will repeat, with new faces, new timelines, new aesthetics, because the formula works. And as long as it works, it will continue to be used. The audience will be invited to believe again, to invest again, to feel again. As the discussion cooled, what remained wasn't outrage. It was reflection. A quiet reckoning with how narratives are built, how they are consumed, and how easily sincerity can be mimicked. And how nearly impossible it has become to distinguish genuine connection from carefully constructed performance. No confirmations arrived. No denials followed. Just a lingering sense that something had shifted irreversibly. That story, whatever its truth, would never be perceived the same way again. And perhaps that is the most permanent consequence of all. Because once the curtain is pulled back, even slightly, it never fully closes. Every future appearance will be viewed through that lens. Every smile questioned. Every silence analyzed. And whether fair or not, that scrutiny becomes part of the legacy. This wasn't a revelation. It was an aftershock. Buckle up, because what we are about to unpack leaves you speechless. Allegedly, this entire narrative, the smiles, the red carpets, the perfectly curated photo ops, was nothing more than a meticulously crafted illusion. Every kiss, every laugh, every publicly adored moment was potentially a calculated move, a chess piece in a game far bigger than love. Jaguar Wright claims that behind all the glamour lies manipulation, strategy, and cold calculation. Pierre wasn't merely dating Tayana Taylor, he was performing a role in a story someone else wrote. Allegedly, Tayana herself wasn't entirely innocent in orchestrating the spectacle. Fans who believed in the fairy tale are now forced to reconsider every viral photo, every glowing interview. Was it love? Or was it optics? Every smile shared for affection, or engineered for maximum impact? Jaguar suggests that this isn't rare in Hollywood. It's a system, a machine built to package emotion and sell it to millions. And when the machine decides a narrative has run its course, heartbreak isn't accidental. It's inevitable. The most tragic part, allegedly, is the human cost, real feelings trapped inside performative roles, emotional manipulation disguised as romance, and a fan base cheering illusions, blind to the fact that the story they invested in may have been engineered from day one. If Jaguar Wright is right, what we call love on social media is often nothing more than a contract signed in shadows, a collaboration between ambition, image, and audience perception. So here's the question you can't ignore. Are we witnessing love, or are we watching carefully crafted careers being protected and manipulated? Are these two hearts truly intertwined, or are they simply players in a meticulously managed Hollywood narrative? Think about it. Every viral smile, every romantic photo, every public appearance, what if it was designed to be seen, not felt? And if that's true, what does that say about everything we've invested in emotionally? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you're shocked. Share this video to expose the illusion before the next chapter fades quietly into curated silence. The truth is out there, and the world deserves to see it.